I've always been a live and let live kind of guy. Mind your business, I'll mind mine, and we'll all get along just fine. That philosophy served me well for the 3 peaceful years I lived in Willow Creek Estates, until Karen Mitchell moved in. Within 6 months of her arrival, she had maneuvered her way onto the HOA board and, not long after, became its president. That's when the real trouble began. My name is Ethan Carter, 37, a freelance graphic designer who works from home. I bought my modest colonial-style house after my divorce as a place to rebuild my life and find some peace. For 3 years, that's exactly what I got. My neighbors were friendly but respectful of privacy. The neighborhood kids knew they could count on me for the best Halloween candy, and the HOA was remarkably hands-off. We paid our dues, they maintained the community pool and playground, and everyone was happy. Then Karen arrived. She pulled up in her sleek Mercedes SUV, designer sunglasses perpetually perched on top of her perfectly highlighted blonde bob, and an endless supply of clipboard checklists. She bought the largest house in the development, a sprawling Tudor that had been on the market for nearly a year due to its inflated price tag. Within weeks, she was attending every HOA meeting, questioning every financial decision, and suggesting improvements to our community standards. When our elderly HOA president, Harold Wilson, stepped down due to health issues, Karen pounced. She ran unopposed for the position, and most homeowners, myself included, didn't pay much attention to the changing of the guard. We would come to regret that apathy. My personal clash with Karen began over the color of my house. When I purchased it, the house was painted a traditional colonial blue with white trim, nothing controversial. Last summer, I decided it needed a fresh coat. After browsing samples for weeks, I settled on a slightly deeper navy blue, still with white trim. The change was subtle. You might not even notice unless you saw a before and after photo, but it gave the house a fresher, more contemporary look. I submitted the proper paint color request form to the HOA, including the exact paint swatches and product codes. 3 weeks passed with no response, which, according to the bylaws, meant automatic approval. So, I hired painters, spent a hefty sum, and had my house repainted. It looked great, and several neighbors even complimented the refresh. 2 days after the painters finished, I found a neon orange violation notice taped to my front door. Unapproved exterior modification. It screamed in bold, all caps text. Property at 347 Willow Creek Drive has been painted without authorization in a non-approved color. Homeowner has 14 days to restore original color or face daily fines. I was baffled. I had followed the proper procedures and waited for the required time before proceeding. I immediately called the number on the violation notice, which connected me directly to Karen. This must be a mistake, I explained after identifying myself. I submitted the color change request over a month ago and never received a denial. According to the bylaws, that constitutes automatic approval after 21 days. Mr. Carter, Karen replied, her voice dripping with condescension, I reviewed your application personally. The color you've painted your house is navy blue, not colonial blue. And navy is not on the approved color palette for Willow Creek Estates. The difference is minimal, I countered. And the bylaws state that if a color is within 2 shades of an approved color, it falls within acceptable parameters. That's your interpretation, Karen said. As HOA president, I have final say on aesthetic matters, and I've determined your house color is not compliant. You have 14 days to repaint to the original color. I followed the procedures and received automatic approval through non-response. I insisted. I'm not repainting a perfectly good house that's already cost me thousands of dollars. Then prepare for fines of $100 per day after the 14-day grace period, she replied crisply. And, Mr. Carter, I suggest you check the newly updated bylaws. The automatic approval clause was removed last month. After hanging up, I immediately went online to check the HOA website. Sure enough, there had been a quiet update to the bylaws, though I never received any notification of the changes, which I was pretty sure violated state HOA regulations. The automatic approval clause had indeed been removed, replaced with language giving the board president discretionary authority on all aesthetic decisions. I spent the next day researching my options and discovered that, under state law, HOA bylaw changes required proper notice to all homeowners and usually a vote. I drafted a formal appeal letter, citing the relevant statutes, and hand-delivered copies to each HOA board member, including Karen. I also reached out to a few neighbors to see if they'd noticed the stealth bylaw changes. None had, and several were equally concerned when I pointed it out. The next morning, I left for a 3-day business trip to meet with clients in Chicago. I made sure my house was securely locked, set my alarm system, and asked my neighbor Martha, a retired teacher in her 60s with a no-nonsense attitude, to keep an eye on the place. She promised to water my plants and collect my mail. When I returned late Friday evening, exhausted from travel delays, Martha was waiting on her porch across the street. She hurried over as I pulled into my driveway. "Ethan, thank goodness you're back," she said, her expression troubled. "Something strange has been going on. Karen has been circling your house multiple times a day, taking photos and making notes. She even brought some men in a white van to look at your exterior yesterday. They were discussing paint samples." I thanked Martha for the heads up and went inside to unpack, too tired to worry about Karen's latest machinations. I assumed she was getting quotes to strengthen her case against me, or perhaps document the violation more thoroughly. I decided to deal with it in the morning. The next day was Saturday, and I slept in, grateful to be in my own bed again. Around 10:30, I was enjoying coffee and catching up on emails when my doorbell rang. It was Martha again, looking flustered. "Ethan, you need to come outside right now. Karen is here with a painting crew, and they're setting up ladders against your house." I rushed outside in my pajama pants and t-shirt to find an incredible scene unfolding. Karen, dressed in crisp white capri pants and a baby blue polo shirt, was directing 2 men in painter's coveralls who were indeed setting up equipment alongside my house. A van with Peterson's professional painting on the side was parked in my driveway, and several buckets of paint were lined up on my lawn. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, walking straight up to Karen. She turned, not even having the grace to look embarrassed. "Mr. Carter, you were informed that your house color is non-compliant. The 14-day grace period expired yesterday, and as per Section 12.4 of the bylaws, the HOA now has the right to remedy violations and bill the homeowner for the cost. I filed an appeal," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "And I was out of town on business, which you would know if you'd bothered to check before sending painters to trespass on my property." "Your appeal was denied," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "And your travel plans are not the HOA's concern. Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to get started. The original colonial blue color will be restored by the end of the day." "This is illegal," I stated flatly. "You cannot just show up and paint someone's house without their consent. I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," Karen replied with a smirk. "I've already spoken with the county sheriff's office about enforcing our bylaws. They're well aware that HOAs have the legal right to remedy violations." While this confrontation was happening, a small crowd of neighbors had begun to gather on the sidewalk, watching with various expressions of disbelief and concern. I noticed my next-door neighbor Ben, a lawyer who worked for the district attorney's office, filming the interaction on his phone. Ben and I had a friendly relationship that mostly involved borrowing lawn tools and occasional driveway basketball games. "Karen," Ben called out, walking over to join us. "I've reviewed the bylaws pretty thoroughly, and I don't see any provision that allows for this kind of action without a court order." Karen shot him an irritated glance. Section 12.4 clearly states, it states the HOA can hire contractors to remedy certain violations after due process and proper notice, Ben interrupted. "But it specifically lists landscaping, trash removal, and broken fixtures. House painting is not included. And furthermore, there's a requirement for a formal hearing before the board, which hasn't occurred." Karen's face flushed. "As president, I have emergency enforcement powers." "No, you don't," another voice chimed in. It was Raj Patel, who I knew was also on the HOA board. "Karen, the board never approved this action. You can't unilaterally decide to paint someone's house." I seized the moment. "Gentlemen," I addressed the painters, "I appreciate that you've been hired for a job, but I am the legal owner of this property, and I do not consent to any painting. If you proceed, it will constitute trespassing and vandalism, and I will press charges." The painters looked uncertainly between me and Karen, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "We were told this was authorized," one of them said hesitantly. "It's not," I stated firmly. "And I have witnesses and video evidence that I have explicitly denied permission." Ben held up his phone meaningfully, still recording. The lead painter turned to Karen. Ma'am, we can't proceed if the homeowner objects. It's against company policy and potentially illegal. We'll need to reschedule until this is resolved. Karen's face contorted with anger. I've put down a non-refundable deposit. Your company assured me you could handle this job today. We can handle painting, the painter replied calmly. But we don't get involved in property disputes. You'll need to sort this out and call us when everyone's on the same page. He gestured to his colleague, and they began packing up their equipment. Karen turned to me, fury evident in every line of her face. This isn't over, Carter. The fines start today, $100 per day until your house is compliant. Actually, Raj interjected, as treasurer of the board, I can't authorize any fines without a majority vote, which hasn't happened. And Karen, we need to have a serious conversation about your actions today. As the painters drove away and the neighbors continued to watch the drama unfold, Karen stormed off to her car, slamming the door with enough force to make everyone wince. The gathered neighbors slowly dispersed, many stopping to express their support for me and their concerns about Karen's leadership. Ben approached, stopping his recording. That was something else, he said, shaking his head. You know, if she had actually started painting, that would have been criminal property damage. I can't believe she thought this would work. I just wanted her to leave me alone, I replied, still somewhat in shock. Power goes to some people's heads, Ben shrugged. Listen, I'd suggest installing some security cameras if you don't already have them. I wouldn't put it past her to try something when you're not around. It was excellent advice, and I acted on it immediately. That afternoon, I purchased and installed a comprehensive security camera system that covered all sides of my house, my driveway, and my front porch. The system sent alerts to my phone when it detected motion and stored footage in the cloud. I made sure the cameras were visible enough to serve as a deterrent, but discreet enough not to be eyesores. The next day, Raj called to inform me that he had called an emergency board meeting to address Karen's actions. He asked if I would attend to present my side of the situation, which I agreed to do. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday evening at the community center. In the meantime, I continued to document everything. I took dated photos of my house, saved all emails and notices, and kept a log of every interaction. I also printed out the relevant state laws regarding HOA governance and bylaw modifications. Tuesday afternoon, my security system sent an alert to my phone while I was working. The front camera showed Karen standing on my porch, placing another notice on my door. I waited until she left, then checked the notice. Another violation, this time claiming my front garden beds were improperly maintained and required immediate attention. The beds were immaculate, with fresh mulch I'd put down just last month. Later that same afternoon, I received 3 more security alerts. Each time, it was Karen walking around my property, taking photos with her phone. On her final circuit, she spent several minutes examining my newly installed security cameras, her expression souring when she realized their presence. She looked directly into one camera, and I swear I could almost see the wheels turning in her head as she realized she was being recorded. Wednesday evening arrived, and the community center was packed for the emergency board meeting. It seemed word had spread about the attempted forced painting, and homeowners were keenly interested in the outcome. The 5-member board sat at a table at the front of the room, with Karen in the center as president. She looked composed but tense, dressed in a conservative pantsuit as if for battle. Raj called the meeting to order and explained the purpose, to address concerns about recent enforcement actions taken by the HOA president without board approval. He then invited me to speak. I presented my case calmly and methodically, sticking to the facts. I explained my proper submission of the paint color change, the lack of timely response constituting automatic approval under the bylaws that were in effect at the time, and the subsequent unannounced changes to those bylaws. I detailed Karen's escalating actions, culminating in the attempt to paint my house without consent. I presented my documentation, including Ben's video of the confrontation, which was played for everyone to see. The room was silent as they watched Karen on the screen, clearly stating her intention to paint my house against my explicit objections. When the video ended, there was a murmur of disapproval from the assembly. Then came the moment that changed everything. I played footage from my security cameras showing Karen's multiple visits to my property, clearly trespassing as she wandered around my yard, taking photos. The timestamp showed she had been there as recently as that morning when I was at a coffee shop working remotely. What was most concerning I concluded, was discovering this on my security footage from yesterday afternoon. I played the final clip, which showed Karen approaching my garage with what appeared to be a small can and a brush in her hand. She looked around furtively, then opened the can and painted a small patch of navy blue on my white garage door. She took a photo of it, then quickly walked away. The room erupted in shocked exclamations. Karen shot to her feet. "That's doctored footage," she shouted. "He's manipulated that video to frame me." Raj called for order, his face grave. "Karen, the metadata on these video files can be verified by experts if necessary. Are you denying that's you in the footage?" "I was conducting an inspection," she insisted. "As for the paint, I was merely taking a sample to match for color compliance purposes." "By painting it onto my garage door?" I asked incredulously. "The door that was previously pristine white, which you defaced to create a new violation?" Ben stood up from the audience. "As an officer of the court, I feel obligated to point out that what we just witnessed on that video constitutes criminal vandalism and potentially filing a false report, since Karen subsequently issued a violation notice for damage she herself caused." Another board member, a quiet man named Tom who rarely spoke at meetings, cleared his throat. "I move that we immediately suspend Karen from her position as president pending a full investigation of these allegations." "Seconded," said the fourth board member, Lisa. "This is absurd," Karen protested. "I've done nothing but try to maintain our community standards and property values." Raj called for a vote. For hands went up in favor of suspension. Only Karen's remained down. "Motion carries," Raj announced. "Karen Mitchell is suspended from the position of HOA president, effective immediately. As vice president, I will assume temporary leadership until this matter is resolved." Karen grabbed her purse and stormed out of the meeting, but not before turning to deliver a parting shot. "You'll all regret this when your property values plummet because people like him," she jabbed a finger in my direction, "are allowed to paint their houses whatever garish colors they want." The door slammed behind her, and there was a moment of awkward silence before Raj continued the meeting. "The board voted to rescind all violation notices issued by Karen in the past 30 days pending review, to restore the original bylaws until proper procedures for amendments could be followed, and to form a committee to review the HOA's governance structure." As the meeting adjourned, numerous neighbors approached me to express their support and share their own stories of run-ins with Karen. It seemed she had been on quite the violation spree since taking office, targeting everything from the wrong shade of mailbox to unauthorized bird feeders. The following week was surprisingly quiet. Karen's suspension had been formalized in a letter from the HOA's attorney, barring her from acting in any official capacity. I fixed the small patch of paint she had applied to my garage door, and my security cameras detected no further trespassers. Then, 10 days after the meeting, Ben knocked on my door one evening. "Thought you'd want to know," he said without preamble. "Karen is being charged with criminal mischief and trespassing. The DA's office decided to pursue it after reviewing your footage and similar complaints from 3 other homeowners who apparently also had security cameras. One caught her removing slats from their fence to create a violation. I was surprised the authorities had taken it so seriously. I just wanted her to leave me alone, not necessarily end up with a criminal record." Ben shrugged. "Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. But if it makes you feel better, she'll probably get a plea deal with community service and restitution. The real punishment for someone like Karen is the public embarrassment." He was right about that. The local community paper ran a small story about an HOA president facing charges for falsifying violations, which was then picked up by one of those viral homeowner nightmare websites. Though Karen wasn't named in the articles, everyone in Willow Creek Estates knew who it was about. 3 weeks later, Karen's Tudor house had a "for sale" sign in the front yard. The HOA, now under Raj's level-headed leadership, underwent a significant restructuring. The bylaws were simplified, the violation process was made more transparent with multiple levels of review, and a new online system allowed homeowners to track the status of any architectural requests or complaints in real time. I was asked to join the new Architectural Review Committee, which I accepted with the condition that we create a more diverse and contemporary approved color palette. The committee agreed, and we spent a productive Saturday with a professional color consultant, creating an expanded range of options that respected the neighborhood's character while allowing for more personal expression. 6 months after the incident, as it came to be known, Karen's house finally sold for significantly less than she had paid for it. According to neighborhood gossip, on moving day, I made a point of being outside, working in my yard, thinking she might want one final confrontation. Instead, she avoided eye contact, directing the movers with less of her former imperious manner. As the moving truck pulled away, my neighbor Martha walked over from across the street. "Good riddance," she said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Do you know what she told me when she first moved in? That my rose bushes were chaotic and I should consider something more structured, like boxwoods. My award-winning roses that I've been tending for 20 years. I laughed. "Well, the new owners seem nice. Young couple with a baby on the way. They came by yesterday to introduce themselves and ask about the neighborhood." "Did you warn them about the HOA?" Martha asked with a wink. "I told them it's under new management," I replied. "Much more reasonable these days." And it was. Under Raj's leadership, the focus shifted from punitive enforcement to community building. The funds previously earmarked for violation processing were redirected to improving the playground and adding a community garden. The annual block party, which had dwindled in recent years, was revived with enthusiastic participation. As for my navy blue house, it became something of a symbol in Willow Creek Estates, a reminder that sometimes you have to stand your ground against unreasonable authority. Several other homeowners, emboldened by my small act of resistance, submitted color change requests under the new expanded palette. Our once uniform neighborhood gradually developed more character and individuality while still maintaining the overall harmony that protected our property values. I kept my security cameras installed, though they rarely captured anything more exciting than the occasional delivery person or wandering neighborhood cat. They served as a reminder that sometimes the best defense against overreach is simply paying attention and having evidence on your side. The following spring, I decided to paint my front door a bright, cheerful yellow, properly submitted and promptly approved by the architectural committee, of course. As I was applying the final coat, the new HOA president stopped by on his evening walk. "Looking good, Ethan," Raj said, admiring the contrast against the navy blue. "You know, if Karen could see this, she'd probably have an aneurysm." I laughed, stepping back to check my work. Sometimes a little color is exactly what a neighborhood needs. "Couldn't agree more," he replied. "Hey, we're still looking for someone to chair the 4th of July picnic committee. If you're interested." "I might be," I said, "as long as there are no clipboard checklists involved." Raj chuckled. "No clipboards, no power trips. Just neighbors enjoying each other's company. That's the kind of HOA I want to run." As he continued on his walk, I put the final touches on my yellow door, thinking about how differently things had turned out than Karen had intended. She had tried to control every aspect of our community through fear and intimidation, only to unite us against her overreach. In trying to paint my house her way, she had inadvertently helped us create a more colorful, vibrant neighborhood than ever before. And the best part? It was all perfectly, properly within the bylaws. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story on Store of Good Stories. If this story touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to hit like and share the video to spread this positive message to more people. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the meaningful stories we share every week. Your support is the biggest motivation for Store of Good Stories to keep bringing heartfelt and valuable stories to you. See you in the next video.